Why, hello there. I'm actually going to show you how to make something that I bet you've bought in the supermarket before, but I tell you what, it is way, way better to make your own. They just taste a whole lot better than it is to buy them in the supermarket. I'm going to be making the crispy onions. If you're in the US, then sometimes we sprinkle these on top of our green bean casserole. You can also find them on top of Asian cuisine sometimes, especially here in Europe. So basically all that you're going to need is some fresh onion and some flour and some spices and some milk. I'm actually just going to start out with the onion in front of us right now. So you can see I've already peeled and cleaned my onion, chopped it in half, and what we're going to do here is we're going to make paper thin onion slices. There's a little bit of a trick to this, but not much of one. You're just trying to slice it as thin as possible. My way of doing this is to take the half of the onion, and we're trying to slice paper thin. So I actually want to be able to see my knife through the onion. So this is even too thick. So I'm going to try this one more time. It's not like going to ruin the crispy onion, but you want it super thin. There we go. So something like this, like paper thin. So I'm going to go ahead and slice up all of my onion in that lovely paper thin fashion. And then I'll be ready to move on to the next step of my recipe. So now that all of our onions are sliced nice and thin, and I bet you that you're tearing up just as much as me from fresh onions, before we add our milk to this bowl, I'm just going to run my fingers through the onions, because you can see here that they exist in layers, and we actually really want to separate these out as much as possible. We want them to be individual strands or circles of onion, and the reason is because they're going to clump together when we put on the flour. And it's not that that doesn't taste delicious, but it'll be a little bit harder to put on a burger if that's our goal. And that's actually what I want to do with these tonight, is I want to put these onto burgers. So I'm just trying to separate out all of my onions, and that's looking pretty good. So I'll rinse my hands here in just a second. The other thing that I'm doing is on my stove, I'm preheating about 1 inch, couple of centimeters of cooking oil in a deep frying pan, because of course these are going to be fried. So now we're ready to pour in our milk. I'm using buttermilk today, but you could literally use any kind of milk, whole fat, half fat, skim, doesn't matter. And I don't need to like totally soak these in milk, especially buttermilk, because it's super thick. I can just pour some in there, and then I'm just going to mix it up and make sure that the buttermilk is on or covering every piece of my onion. Because what I'll end up doing is actually shaking some of the buttermilk off and then dumping this into a flour mixture that we're going to make in just a second. So we can let that sit, and then we're going to make our flour mixture. For this, you're going to need the spices of your choice, you're going to need flour, and you're going to need some cornstarch. So me being kind of the crazy home chef that I am, of course, I don't have quantities on this recipe. What we're doing is we're making the flour mixture that's actually going to make our onions crispy. So I'm going to try and give you guys measurements today, even though normally I would just be dumping stuff in a bowl and hoping for the best. So we're going to start with about a cup of all-purpose flour. And you know what I'm going to do? I always like to make extra of this stuff, because you never really know how much you're going to need, even though I'm sure that 2 cups of flour is probably too much. I'm going to add it anyway. So I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Then I think I'm going to go with 2 or 3 tablespoons of corn starch, not to be confused with corn meal. Totally different stuff. So there's, come on, 1 and 2 is what I'm going to start with, methinks. Now I'm going to try to keep this to tablespoons and teaspoons, because that's just easier. However, my next ingredient is going to be cayenne pepper, and even a teaspoon of this is probably too strong. So I'm going to sprinkle what I believe to be about a half a teaspoon in there. Maybe a little bit more. With paprika, I can add a whole tablespoon of this stuff, because paprika is awesome and is used in many fried dishes. If I can get it out of the jar. There we go, tablespoon of paprika, and then a chosen salt. For me, it's going to be a salt mix that was sent to me from the US, and I'm going to use about a tablespoon of this. You could literally use any kind of, actually it might not be a tablespoon. I don't think I'm that crazy. No, it's gonna be about a half a tablespoon. I don't wanna over salt this because that would be super gross. You could use salt and pepper, you could use Johnny's seasoning salt, you could use all sorts of different stuff in here. This is just what I'm choosing to use. And then we're gonna mix that all up, and I'm gonna be looking honestly for a color that I like. That looks like it's gonna be pretty tasty though, so we can leave it at that. Now, once my oil is totally heated, then I can begin the process of frying. So I want to make sure that I prepare really well for that because I don't think my oil is preheated yet. So we can set this aside. We can set our onions and our buttermilk aside. And the last thing that we're going to prepare is a place to put our fried onions. For that, I'm just going to use a simple cookie sheet and probably 4 to 6 pieces of paper towel. And this is just going to be to drain my onions after they've cooked. Another tool that I'm going to want to have handy is some kind of slotted spoon, metal, so that it can sit in the oil, in the hot oil, and fish things out in large scoopies. And basically, that's all that I need to get ready. I'm going to put a few more paper towels on this sheet and wait for my oil to preheat. So here we are in front of our hot pan of oil, and we're going to test to see if the oil is ready. So what I'm looking for is not crazy activity because I don't want my onions to burn. These are very delicate little things that I'm cooking, but I certainly don't want it to just sit there doing nothing because then my breading soaks up oil and ew. So all I'm doing is coating one single piece of onion in my flour mixture, which I'll show you in just a second if our oil is ready. I'm shaking it off here, and I'm going to plop that into my oil, and I'm just going to let it cook for, I don't know, a couple of minutes. Maybe could take 3, maybe could take 5. When our oil gets a little bit hotter, this could sit in here as little as 30 seconds to 1 minute, but that tends to mean that the oil is too hot. So we're going to let this sit for just a second, and we're going to see how it does. Let's take our piece of onion out, and we're going to drain it on our paper towel, and then we're going to give it a taste and see if it's crispy enough, see if our temperature was good enough, etc. We're going to be looking at color, all sorts of things. So now that is a nice golden brown. Before I can touch it though, I got to let it sit there for a second. It looks like our oil temperature is good though. It's also always a really good idea to test something, to try it before you actually cook a whole batch, because if you got all of your spices wrong, you're going to find out now instead of later. So we'll give this a taste. Seems crispy, crunchy, and delicious. So now we can move back to our frying pan and we can cook the rest of our onions. So now, of course, with our utensils standing by and our oil preheated, we can cook more onions. So we don't want to do too many at a time because that can cause the oil to cool down and then they won't cook as efficiently. But I would say a pretty reasonable handful of onions is pretty good. So I'm just shaking a little bit of the buttermilk off, and you can see here, and I'm just going to plop them into the flour. And then I'm going to use a fork to mix them up and get them coated. And they're going to separate all on their own because they're going to get a bunch of flour on them. Then it's my job, because the fork won't do this very well, to fish them out. The hand that touched the buttermilk, the hand that reached in for the onions, is wet. I'm going to use my clean hand, my dry hand, to get them out of the flour. This reduces the number of times that I actually have to wash my hands. And then I'm just going to sprinkle my onions carefully into the flour, because my arm is still hanging over that oil and I don't want to burn myself. But you see how I'm using my hand as like a sieve to get a lot of the extra flour. I'm not going to get all of it. This oil, we probably won't be able to reuse it again. And that's okay. And I just want to get out as many of these onion pieces as I can. I'm never going to find them all, but you get them all in different batches, so it's okay. Shake that out. In she goes. One more. And then I need to watch these really carefully because it's only going to take like a minute for some of these to fry. I don't want to burn anything. All right. So now we're cooking. So you can see already it's probably only been, I don't know, 45 seconds, 1 minute. We've already got some really nice dark brown onions. So we're going to think about lifting these out here pretty quick. And the tricky part is you'll notice I had to put the onions in at different times because I was fishing them out of the flour, which means that some of these onions are going to be more done than others, and that's okay. They're all still going to be crispy. They're all still going to be ready. It's just some will be a little bit more brown. So I'm already going to take these out. You can see here. I don't want to burn them because trust me, burnt fried onions don't taste good. And now I'm just going to systematically fry up the rest of these onions, and I will rejoin you when I am finished. All right, moment of truth. Time to build a burger with our freshly fried onion strings. So of course we're going to start with whatever it is that you're going to use as a burger bun. In this case, I just homemade some soft dinner rolls because we're making sliders tonight, which are little itty bitty teeny burgers. So I'm going to start with some ketchup, which is my husband's favorite. As you can see, this ketchup bottle is very cooperative, and obviously you want the dribble on the sides. Makes it much more artistic. Now, I like to use my lettuce on the bottom here because it sticks very well to my ketchup. And I'm going to pile a burger on there. Yummy fresh all beef burger with some cheddar cheese. Now I'm going to go for my tomato. And in this case, we're going to do a nice little bacon burger. So I have some crispy bacon here. And then last but certainly not least comes our crispy onion. And I'm just going to pile these on top. Now it's going to be a little tricky to get them to stay on because this is a big old slider. But we'll manage all right. Whoopsies. Get back on there. And there we have it. A delicious burger with crispy onion topping.